The warehouse floor shook as the forklift crashed through the loading dock doors, its metal forks piercing the night air like spears. Tyler Brennan rolled sideways, concrete scraping against his jacket as sparks showered down from the overhead lighting fixture that had been ripped clean from its mounting. The machine's engine roared, drowning out the shouting voices of the three men who'd cornered him in what should have been the safety of his own workplace. "You think you can just walk away from family?" Jason's voice cracked with desperation as he wrestled with the forklift's controls, his hands shaking from whatever substances were coursing through his system. "You think you can just watch me drown?" Tyler sprang to his feet, his eyes scanning for an escape route through the maze of shipping containers. His younger brother had always been reckless, but this was madness. The debt collectors who'd been pursuing Jason for months had finally caught up with him, and now they wanted Tyler to pay the price for his refusal to bail out his siblings' latest failed venture. "Jason, stop this!" Tyler shouted over the mechanical screams. "This won't solve anything." But his brother was beyond reasoning. The forklift lurched forward again, its massive weight crushing a stack of cardboard boxes as Tyler dove behind a concrete pillar. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from Emily, his wife of 8 years. "Where are you? We need to talk. If only she knew." 3 hours earlier, Tyler had been sitting across from his parents in the sterile conference room of Whitman and Associates, watching his family's lawyer explain why he needed to sign documents that would make him financially responsible for Jason's catastrophic business decisions. The crypto cafe had hemorrhaged money for 2 years, leaving a trail of angry investors and unpaid suppliers in its wake. $90,000, his father Frank had said, his weathered hands trembling as he slid the papers across the mahogany table. "That's what it'll take to keep your brother out of federal prison." Tyler had studied the documents without touching them. "And if I refuse?" His mother, Carol, had looked at him like he'd just suggested burning down an orphanage. Her face, lined with years of worry and disappointment, contorted into an expression of pure moral outrage. "Tyler, this is your blood we're talking about. Family doesn't abandon family. Family doesn't dump their failures on each other either," Tyler had replied, standing to leave. The chair scraped against the floor with a harsh sound that seemed to punctuate his words. "I've watched you enable Jason for 33 years. I won't be part of it anymore." The silence that followed had been deafening. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Then Frank's voice, cold and final. "Then you're no son of mine." Now, as Tyler crouched behind industrial shelving while his brother tried to flatten him with heavy machinery, those words seemed almost quaint. The forklift's forks scraped against the concrete wall inches from his head, sending chips of stone flying like shrapnel and filling the air with dust that made his eyes water. "The police are already on their way," Tyler called out, though he hadn't managed to call them yet. "This ends now, Jason." The engine cut suddenly, leaving only the echo of Tyler's voice in the cavernous space and the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. He heard footsteps, multiple sets moving in coordination like soldiers or professional criminals. Jason hadn't come alone. "Maybe we should discuss this like civilized people," came a voice Tyler didn't recognize. Smooth, educated, with the kind of confidence that came from wearing expensive suits and never having to face real consequences. The voice carried easily through the warehouse space, suggesting someone accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Tyler peered around the pillar and saw them. Jason, wild-eyed and twitching like a hophead in withdrawal. A tall man in a navy blazer who had to be Kyle, Jason's former business partner, and a third figure hanging back in the shadows near the loading dock entrance, his posture suggesting professional muscle rather than family drama. "Kyle Westman," Tyler said, recognizing the man from photos Emily had shown him months ago. She'd mentioned meeting him at some marketing conference. Described him as innovative and ambitious. Looking at him now, Tyler was beginning to understand just how ambitious Kyle really was. "Tyler Brennan," Kyle replied with a smile that never reached his eyes. His teeth were perfectly white, his hair professionally styled, his entire appearance crafted to project success and trustworthiness. "I've heard so much about you. Your wife speaks very highly of your practical nature." Something in Kyle's tone made Tyler's stomach clench. The way he'd emphasized wife carried implications that Tyler wasn't ready to process. Suggestions that made his mind race through months of Emily's late nights and secretive phone calls. "What do you want?" Tyler stepped out from behind the pillar, keeping his hands visible. 3 against 1. But he knew this warehouse better than anyone. He'd spent 5 years learning every corner, every exit, every potential advantage. "What your family wants," Kyle said, pulling out a tablet and swiping to what looked like a legal document. The screen glowed in the dim warehouse lighting, casting shadows across Kyle's face that made him look almost demonic. "For you to sign this loan guarantee. Very simple. Very clean. And if I refuse?" Kyle's smile widened, revealing those perfect teeth again. "Well, that would be unfortunate. You see, Jason here owes money to some very serious people. The kind who don't accept payment plans or IOUs. The kind who collect debts with interest that compounds in ways that go far beyond mere mathematics. And when they can't collect from him," Kyle shrugged elegantly, "they tend to expand their collection efforts to include immediate family members." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just beginning to spread. Tyler's mind raced through his options. The nearest exit was 40 feet away, blocked by Kyle and his mystery associate. The office upstairs had a phone, but they'd hear him climbing the metal stairs. The loading dock was blocked, and the freight elevator was too slow and exposed. "My wife," Tyler said carefully, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. "How exactly does she fit into this?" Kyle exchanged a look with Jason, who shifted uncomfortably and wouldn't meet Tyler's eyes. "Emily's been very supportive of our efforts to resolve this family matter. She understands that sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good." The words hit Tyler like a physical blow, each syllable landing with the impact of a hammer striking an anvil. Emily had been distant for weeks, claiming work stress, taking calls in the other room, staying late at the office. He'd attributed it to the tension with his family, but now dark possibilities were crystallizing in his mind like poison forming into solid shapes. "Show him," Jason said suddenly, his voice cracking like a teenager going through puberty. "Just show him so he knows." Kyle hesitated for a moment, as if considering the wisdom of revelation, then swiped to a different screen on his tablet. Even from 20 feet away, Tyler could see enough to make his world tilt sideways. Photos, messages, timestamps from the past 3 months, his wife's face, his wife's words, his wife's body in intimate moments that had clearly not been shared with her husband. "Emily's been helping us understand your psychological profile," Kyle explained with clinical detachment, like a doctor discussing symptoms with a patient. "Your weaknesses, your pressure points, your financial habits, very thorough, very professional." Tyler's vision tunneled, and for a moment he thought he might actually faint. The betrayal was so complete, so carefully orchestrated, that for a moment he couldn't breathe. His wife hadn't just taken Kyle's side. She'd been feeding him intelligence, mapping out Tyler's vulnerabilities like a military strategist planning an invasion. "Of course," Kyle continued, his voice taking on the rhythm of a professor delivering a lecture. "She initially hoped we could resolve this without unpleasantness. She suggested we appeal to your sense of family loyalty first. When that failed, she helped us understand that more direct motivation might be necessary." "Where is she now?" Tyler's voice came out steady, though rage was building in his chest like pressure in a boiler that was about to explode. "Safe," Kyle said, the word carrying multiple layers of meaning. "Waiting to see how this conversation concludes." Tyler nodded slowly, his mind shifting into the analytical mode that had made him successful in logistics management. Assess the situation, identify resources, plan multiple contingencies, consider all variables, execute with precision. "The loan guarantee," he said, his voice betraying none of the turmoil roiling beneath the surface. "Let me see the terms." Kyle stepped closer, holding out the tablet with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. As he did, Tyler noticed the man by the door, shifting position slightly, and caught a glimpse of something metallic under his jacket. Professional muscle, then. This was more than family pressure. This was organized coercion with the backing of genuine force. Tyler took the tablet and scrolled through the document, his eyes moving quickly over the dense legal text. $90,000 in immediate debt with Tyler's house and retirement accounts as collateral. Personal guarantee clauses that would make him liable for any future business debts Jason might incur. Essentially, financial slavery disguised as family loyalty, a trap designed to bind him to his brother's failures for the rest of his life. "This is quite comprehensive," Tyler said, buying time while he memorized the warehouse layout around them. "Very thorough. Your wife helped draft some of the language," Kyle said proudly, like a coach praising a star player. "She has an excellent understanding of your assets and financial vulnerabilities." Tyler handed back the tablet, his face betraying nothing of the volcanic fury building inside him. I need to make a call. To whom? My lawyer. If I'm signing something this significant, I need legal counsel. Kyle's expression hardened, the mask of civility slipping for just a moment to reveal something much darker underneath. I'm afraid that's not an option. This needs to be resolved tonight. Then I'm afraid we have a problem, Tyler said, and sprinted toward the freight elevator. He made it 10 steps before the first warning blast from a tool echoed through the warehouse, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls and metal ceiling like thunder in a canyon. Not at him, into the air, a warning, but it confirmed what Tyler had suspected. This had moved far beyond family drama into genuinely dangerous territory. Tyler. Jason's voice cracked with panic, all pretense of toughness evaporating in the face of actual violence. Just sign the damn papers. They'll hurt you. They'll hurt Emily. Tyler dove behind a stack of shipping pallets as footsteps pounded across the concrete floor, their echo creating a staccato rhythm that matched his heartbeat. His mind raced through the warehouse's layout. The freight elevator was out. Too slow, too exposed. The main office upstairs had a landline, but getting there meant crossing open ground under the eyes of armed men. The loading dock was blocked by Kyle's associate. But there was another option. The maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the warehouse connected to the city's old steam heating system. Tyler had used them once to trace a persistent leak that had been costing the company thousands in water damage. They were cramped, dark, and led to at least 3 different buildings in the industrial complex. He heard Kyle's voice, calm and controlled despite the chaos. Mr. Brennan, you're only making this more difficult for everyone. Your wife is very concerned about your well-being. Tyler reached into his pocket and activated his phone's voice recorder, his fingers moving with practiced precision despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Whatever happened next, he wanted evidence. Tyler, please, Jason called out, and now there was genuine fear in his voice, the kind of terror that came from realizing you'd gotten in deeper than you could handle. They said they'd hurt Emily if you don't cooperate. Where is my wife? Tyler shouted back, his voice carrying clearly through the industrial space. She's safe, Kyle replied, but there was an edge to his voice now, a hint that his patience was beginning to wear thin. And she'll stay that way as long as you make the sensible choice here. Tyler's jaw clenched as he processed the implications. Emily wasn't just involved. She was being held as leverage, insurance against his cooperation. His mind painted vivid pictures of what might be happening to her, and rage flooded through him like molten metal. He could hear them moving, trying to flank his position with military precision. The maintenance access panel was 15 feet away, behind another row of shipping containers. He'd have to move fast and hope they didn't know the warehouse well enough to anticipate his route. He grabbed a wrench from a nearby tool cart and hurled it across the warehouse with all his strength. It clattered against the far wall with a sound like breaking glass, drawing their attention for the few precious seconds he needed to sprint to the access panel. His fingers found the recessed handle just as Kyle's voice rang out again. He's heading for the utility access. Johnson, cover the exit points. So they did know the building layout. That meant planning, reconnaissance, professional preparation. Tyler's situation was worse than he'd thought, but at least now he understood the scope of what he was facing. The maintenance tunnel was a nightmare of pipes, cables, and darkness that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. Tyler crawled through spaces barely wide enough for his shoulders, his phone's flashlight creating dancing shadows that made every turn look like a dead end or potential trap. Behind him, he could hear voices echoing through the tunnel system as his pursuers tried to follow, their curses and frustrated shouts bouncing off the concrete walls. 20 minutes of crawling brought him to an access point in the neighboring building, a packaging facility that shared utilities with Tyler's warehouse. He emerged in a storage room filled with industrial supplies, his clothes torn and dirty, his hands scraped raw from concrete and metal. The taste of dust filled his mouth, and his knees ached from the crawling. But he was alive and free. Tyler found a working phone and dialed 911 with hands that were steadier than he'd expected. Police emergency. This is Tyler Brennan. I'm being held against my will by armed men at Brennan Logistics, 1247 Industrial Boulevard. They've threatened to injure my wife if I don't sign financial documents under duress. Sir, are you in immediate danger? Yes. They have at least one firearm and have made explicit threats. I managed to escape, but they may be pursuing me. Officers are dispatched. Stay on the line and tell me your current location. Tyler gave his location and listened as the dispatcher coordinated the response. Through the window, he could see police cars arriving at his warehouse. their lights painting the industrial complex in alternating red and blue that reminded him of emergency rooms and disaster scenes. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We have Emily. Call off the police or she pays the price." Tyler's breath caught like ice in his lungs as he read the message twice, then a third time, hoping the words would somehow change. He showed the message to the arriving officers, and within minutes a tactical team was assembled. But as they prepared to storm the warehouse, Tyler's phone rang. "Tyler?" Emily's voice, shaky and afraid, came through the speaker with crystal clarity. "They want me to tell you to call off the police." "Emily, are you hurt?" "No, but Tyler, they're serious. Kyle says if you don't sign those papers and make this go away, they'll..." The line went dead, leaving only silence and the sound of Tyler's own breathing. Detective Sarah Martinez, the lead officer on scene, studied Tyler's face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd seen too much human misery. "Mr. Brennan, I need you to understand something. If we go in there without knowing your wife's exact location, we could be putting her in greater danger. And if we don't go in, they'll disappear with her," Tyler replied, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "These aren't impulsive criminals. This is organized, planned. They have contingencies." Martinez nodded grimly, her expression suggesting she'd reached the same conclusion. "Tell me everything you know about Kyle Westman." Tyler spent the next hour laying out everything he knew and suspected. Kyle's relationship with his wife, the crypto cafe investment scheme that had never made financial sense, the threatening debt collectors who seemed too professional to be ordinary street muscle, the carefully orchestrated family pressure campaign that had isolated him from any support system. As he talked, pieces of a larger picture began emerging. Kyle wasn't just Jason's business partner. He was running a sophisticated operation that used family dynamics and personal relationships to coerce sufferers into financial compliance. Emily hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been recruited as an asset, a weapon turned against her own husband. "Mr. Brennan," Martinez said finally, her voice carrying the weight of grim experience, "I think your family situation is more complicated than you realized. We've confirmed there's been a leak," Martinez added quietly, glancing toward the van where the FBI liaison was on the phone. "Someone inside Federal Logistics tipped Kyle off about the raid. The Bureau is already isolating the breach. We've plugged the access point and locked down further communications. He won't get that warning again." At 2 a.m., the tactical team breached the warehouse with explosive charges that lit up the night sky. They found it empty, except for security footage that showed Kyle, Jason, and their associate leaving through the rear exit 20 minutes after the police arrived. Tyler's phone, abandoned on the warehouse floor like a discarded piece of evidence, contained a final message. "You chose law enforcement over family. Emily pays the consequences." But Kyle had made a crucial mistake. In his haste to evacuate, he'd left behind the tablet with all the financial documents and correspondence. And Emily, in her role as intelligence gatherer, had been thorough in documenting everything, including Kyle's plans and the network of sufferers he'd been targeting across multiple states. Tyler spent the rest of the night at the police station, working with financial crimes investigators to unravel the scope of Kyle's operation. What had started as family pressure to pay Jason's debts was actually part of a larger scheme targeting men with significant assets and exploitable family relationships. "Your wife," Detective Martinez explained as dawn broke over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed almost mockingly beautiful, "may have been a sufferer herself initially. These operations often start with romance scams or fake business opportunities. By the time the target realizes what's happening, they're already compromised." "You mentioned she helped prepare your taxes," Martinez said, flipping through a report. "She likely used that access to pull detailed information, company documents, investment summaries, even personnel records, remote login credentials, or shared household files. You trusted her. That was all she needed." "But the messages," Tyler said, pulling up the photos Kyle had shown him. "The photos, the strategic planning, could be coercion. We've seen it before. They get someone in deep enough that they have to choose between participating or facing destruction." Tyler wanted to believe that, but the evidence was mounting that Emily's involvement had been voluntary, calculated, and extensive. At 7 a.m., his phone rang. Emily's number. "Tyler?" Her voice was different now, harder, more controlled, like someone who'd made peace with difficult decisions. "We need to talk." "Where are you?" "Somewhere safe? Away from the police." "Emily, you need to come in. Kyle's operation is bigger than you know. You're in danger." I'm exactly where I need to be, she said coolly, her tone carrying an edge of finality. The question is, what are you willing to do to get your life back? Tyler felt something cold settle in his chest, like ice forming in his veins. What do you mean? Kyle has video of our conversation tonight. You threatening Jason, refusing to help family, choosing law enforcement over loyalty. Combined with your history of family conflict, it paints a very specific picture. You're threatening me. I'm offering you a choice. Sign the financial guarantee, transfer the money to cover Jason's debts, and this all goes away. Refuse, and that video goes public along with a very detailed account of your psychological instability and family abandonment issues. Tyler's jaw clenched as he processed the implications. And you get what out of this? Freedom, Emily said without hesitation, the word carrying years of accumulated resentment. From a marriage to someone who puts money before family. From a life of being married to someone who can't even help his own brother? Is Kyle there with you? A pause that stretched long enough to be meaningful. Kyle understands loyalty. He understands what it means to fight for the people you care about. Emily, listen to me very carefully. Kyle is running a criminal operation. You're not his partner. You're his sufferer. When this collapses, you'll be the one facing charges while he disappears. You're wrong, she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice for the first time since the conversation had begun. Then prove it. Ask Kyle about his other targets. Ask him about Sarah Chen in Portland or Michael Rodriguez in Phoenix. Ask him how many other family crises he's resolved. The line went quiet for a long moment, filled only with the sound of distant traffic and Emily's breathing. You have 24 hours, Emily said finally. After that, the video goes public, and you'll have nothing left to protect. The call ended, leaving Tyler staring at his phone and realizing that his 8-year marriage had just become another battlefield in Kyle's war against his sufferers. Detective Martinez had been listening to the call through the department's recording equipment. Mr. Brennan, I think it's time we discussed protective custody. No, Tyler said firmly, his voice carrying a resolve that surprised even him. It's time we discuss taking Kyle down. Over the next 18 hours, Tyler worked with federal agents to piece together Kyle's criminal network. The crypto cafe had been just one of dozens of fake business ventures designed to create debt crises that could be leveraged against family members. The operation had netted millions over 3 years, always staying just below the threshold that would trigger major federal attention. Until now, Tyler's case was the break law enforcement had been waiting for. Unlike Kyle's other sufferers, Tyler had resources, connections, and most importantly, the willingness to fight back rather than pay up and stay quiet. But first, he had to save Emily from herself. The meet was set for 8 p.m. at the abandoned Riverside Industrial Complex, a sprawling maze of defunct factories and empty warehouses that Kyle had apparently been using as his base of operations. Tyler would come alone, sign the financial documents, and transfer the funds electronically. In exchange, Emily would be released and the video evidence would be destroyed. Of course, Tyler had no intention of honoring those terms. Federal agents had the complex surrounded by 6 p.m., their positions carefully coordinated to avoid detection while maintaining clear sight lines on all potential escape routes. Tyler wore a wire and carried a modified phone that would transmit his location in real time. The plan was simple. Get Kyle talking, confirm Emily's location, and provide the signal for tactical teams to move in. What they found instead was a trap within a trap within a trap. Tyler arrived at the designated warehouse to find Emily waiting alone, sitting in a metal chair under a single hanging light bulb that cast harsh shadows across her face. She looked tired, frightened, but unharmed. The sight of her stirred complex emotions in Tyler's chest. Relief, anger, love, betrayal, all tangled together like barbed wire. Tyler, she said as he approached, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry it came to this. Where's Kyle? Close enough, came Kyle's voice from speakers mounted in the warehouse rafters, the sound distorted by the building's acoustics. But not stupid enough to be in the same building as a federal wire operation. Tyler's chest clenched like frozen steel as the implications hit him. Kyle knew about the surveillance, which meant either they had a leak in law enforcement, or Kyle's operation was even more sophisticated than anyone had realized. Emily, Kyle's voice continued with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. Please explain to your husband how this is going to work. Emily's face hardened, and Tyler saw something in her expression that he'd never seen before. a coldness that made her look like a stranger. Tyler, the FBI operation you're running has been compromised from the beginning. Kyle has contacts in federal law enforcement. They know about the wire, the tracking device, and the tactical teams positioned around the building. That's impossible, Tyler said. But even as he spoke, he was remembering anomalies from the briefing, questions that seemed too specific, preparation that seemed too convenient. Kyle's been running this operation for years, Emily continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a prepared speech. Do you really think he'd still be free if he couldn't neutralize law enforcement when necessary? Tyler's mind raced through the implications. If Kyle had federal contacts, then the entire operation was blown. Worse, the tactical teams outside might be walking into an ambush, putting innocent officers at risk. However, Kyle's voice crackled through the speakers with electronic distortion. We're not unreasonable people. Emily has convinced me that you might be willing to resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone. What kind of resolution? Tyler asked, though he was already reaching for his phone to warn the federal agents. The original plan, Emily said, standing from her chair with fluid grace. You sign the financial guarantee, transfer the $90,000 to cover Jason's debts, and walk away. In exchange, you get your wife back, and your life continues as normal. Tyler's phone showed no signal bars. The warehouse was being jammed, cutting off his communication with the outside world. And if I refuse? Then the video of you threatening Jason gets released along with documentation of your history of abandoning family members in crisis. Your employment gets questioned. Your marriage gets destroyed. And Emily, Kyle's voice paused dramatically. Well, Emily has made her choice about where her loyalties lie. Tyler looked at his wife, searching for any sign of the woman he'd married 8 years ago. Emily, is this really what you want? I want to be married to someone who fights for the people he loves, she said, her words carrying the weight of years of accumulated disappointment. Kyle fights for people. Kyle takes risks for people. Kyle doesn't abandon family when things get difficult. Kyle manipulates people, Tyler replied, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. Kyle destroys families for profit. Kyle is using you, and when this operation collapses, you'll be the one facing federal charges while he disappears with all the money. You're wrong, Emily said, but there was less certainty in her voice than before. Tyler made a decision that would haunt him for years afterward. Instead of continuing to argue with his wife, instead of trying to save their marriage, instead of signing the documents to make the problem go away, he did something that Kyle's psychological profile had never anticipated. He walked away. Tyler, Emily called after him, her voice cracking with something that might have been genuine panic. If you leave now, it's over. We're over. Tyler stopped at the warehouse door and turned back, his silhouette framed against the darkness outside. We've been over since the moment you chose Kyle over 8 years of marriage. I just didn't know it yet. Tyler, please. Now there was genuine panic in Emily's voice, the first real emotion he'd heard from her all night. Kyle said if you don't sign, there will be consequences. There are always consequences, Tyler said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. The question is, who pays them? He walked out of the warehouse into the industrial complex's maze of buildings and abandoned equipment. His phone immediately reconnected to the cellular network, and he used it to call Detective Martinez. The warehouse is a trap, he reported without preamble. Kyle knows about the federal operation. Emily is being held in Building 7, but Kyle's not there. I think he's using her as bait while he escapes. Martinez didn't flinch. We'll move, but carefully. If Kyle anticipated a raid, the building could be rigged, or they could be waiting with heavier muscle. We're delaying breach until surveillance confirms Emily's exact location and confirms no hostiles remain. No unnecessary risks. Tyler watched the red and blue lights strobe across the warehouse siding, the silence pressing in like a held breath. Mr. Brennan, you were supposed to wait for our signal before. There is no signal, Tyler interrupted, his voice hard with certainty. Kyle has federal contacts. This whole operation has been compromised from the beginning. 20 minutes later, tactical teams stormed the warehouse with explosive precision to find Emily alone, exactly as Tyler had reported. Kyle, Jason, and their associates had vanished like smoke, leaving behind only Emily and a laptop containing Tyler's financial information. Emily was arrested on charges of conspiracy, extortion, and wire fraud. As she was led away in handcuffs, she screamed at Tyler with raw hatred. This is your fault. You could have just signed the papers. You could have saved Jason. You could have saved us. Tyler watched the police car disappear into the night and felt something die inside his chest. Not love that had died hours ago. Something deeper, trust, faith in human nature. The belief that family meant something more than convenience and exploitation. 2 weeks later, Tyler sat in his lawyer's office reviewing divorce papers and criminal charges that were expanding daily as federal investigators unraveled Kyle's network like pulling threads from a tapestry. "Mr. Brennan," his attorney Janet Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of difficult news, "I need you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Your wife's involvement wasn't peripheral. She was a key operational component of Kyle's scheme. The financial intelligence she provided, the psychological manipulation strategies she developed, the sufferer targeting profiles, this was sophisticated criminal enterprise." Tyler stared out the window at the city skyline, watching traffic move in, patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. What about Jason? Still missing. Kyle took him when they evacuated. Whether as a partner or a hostage is unclear. And Kyle himself? Gone. But federal agencies in 6 states are coordinating a manhunt. His operation was bigger than anyone realized. Your case was just the trigger that brought it all down. Tyler's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You chose law over family, now you have neither. Enjoy your victory." He showed the message to Janet, who immediately forwarded it to federal investigators. But Tyler knew it wouldn't lead anywhere. Kyle was too smart, too careful, too experienced at disappearing when operations went sideways. The divorce proceedings began 3 weeks later. Emily, facing 15 years in federal prison, had hired an aggressive attorney who was arguing that she'd been coerced and manipulated by Kyle's criminal organization. The strategy might have worked if not for the extensive electronic evidence showing that Emily had been a willing and enthusiastic participant in planning Tyler's financial destruction. "Mr. Brennan," Emily's attorney Sarah Williams argued in front of Judge Patricia Chen, her voice ringing with righteous indignation, "My client was the sufferer of sophisticated psychological manipulation by Kyle Westman's criminal organization. She believed she was helping resolve a legitimate family financial crisis." Tyler's attorney, Janet Morrison, stood to respond, her movements precise and confident. "Your Honor, the evidence shows that Mrs. Brennan spent 3 months gathering detailed financial intelligence on my client, including photographs of bank statements, copies of investment portfolios, and strategic assessments of his psychological vulnerabilities. This was not the behavior of a manipulation sufferer. This was the behavior of a criminal co-conspirator." Judge Chen reviewed the evidence files with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human betrayal. "Miss Williams, I have read the text messages between your client and Mr. Westman. They contain detailed discussions of how to maximize psychological pressure on Mr. Brennan, including deliberate strategies to isolate him from family support systems. These communications span several months and show clear criminal intent." "Your Honor," Williams replied, desperation creeping into her voice, "those messages were produced under duress. Mr. Westman threatened my client with exposure of compromising personal information if she didn't comply with his demands." "Then, explain these financial transfers," Judge Chen said, holding up a bank statement with the precision of a prosecutor. Presenting evidence. "Your client moved $12,000 from joint accounts into personal accounts that were then used to fund Mr. Westman's operation. When did Mr. Westman coerce her into making those transfers?" Emily's case was falling apart in real time. Tyler watched his wife of 8 years try to explain away evidence of systematic betrayal and felt nothing but cold satisfaction mixed with the bitter ashes of what had once been love. The criminal trial began 6 months later. Federal prosecutors had built a case that painted Kyle's operation as a sophisticated, organized crime network that had targeted dozens of families across multiple states. Emily was offered a plea agreement that would reduce her sentence to 5 years in exchange for cooperation and testimony against Kyle. She refused. "Mrs. Brennan believes in Mr. Westman's innocence," her attorney explained to the press with the kind of confidence that sounded hollow even to someone who wasn't paying close attention. "She will not provide false testimony against someone she believes has been wrongly accused." Tyler read the statement in his new apartment, a modern high-rise overlooking the river, far from the suburban house where he'd built 8 years of marriage with a woman who'd turned out to be a stranger. The federal agents tracking Kyle's network had discovered evidence linking him to at least 47 similar operations across 6 states. Families destroyed, life savings stolen, relationships weaponized for profit. The crypto cafe that had started Tyler's nightmare was just one small piece of a criminal empire worth tens of millions of dollars. But Kyle himself remained a ghost. Interpol had flagged his passport, federal marshals had traced his financial accounts, and cybercrime units had analyzed his digital footprints with the kind of resources usually reserved for international terrorists. Nothing. He'd vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. Emily's trial lasted 3 weeks. Tyler testified for 2 days, detailing the systematic manipulation and financial coercion his wife had participated in. Under cross-examination, Emily's attorney tried to paint him as a cold, calculating man who'd abandoned his family in their time of need. "Mr. Brennan," Sarah Williams asked during cross-examination, her voice carrying the kind of moral authority that defense attorneys perfected over years of practice, "isn't it true that you refused to help your own brother avoid federal prosecution?" "I refuse to enable my brother's irresponsible financial decisions," Tyler replied calmly, his voice betraying none of the turmoil beneath the surface. "And when your family asked you to show loyalty and solidarity, you chose instead to turn your back on them? I chose not to reward failure and manipulation." "Mr. Brennan, do you love your wife?" Tyler looked across the courtroom at Emily, who was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "I loved the woman I thought I married. That woman turned out not to exist. Isn't it true that you've systematically isolated yourself from every meaningful relationship in your life?" "Objection," Janet Morrison said with sharp precision. "Relevance?" "Sustained," Judge Chen ruled. "Miss Williams, please focus on the charges against your client." But the damage was done. Tyler's testimony had painted him as exactly the kind of man who might drive a wife to desperate measures. Cold, unforgiving, emotionally unavailable. Emily was convicted on all charges: conspiracy, extortion, wire fraud, and organized criminal activity. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in federal prison. As the bailiff led her away, Emily turned back to look at Tyler one final time. "I hope you're satisfied," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "You got what you wanted." Tyler met her gaze without flinching. "I wanted a wife who wouldn't betray me. I wanted a family that wouldn't try to destroy me. I wanted people around me who understood the difference between loyalty and exploitation." "You wanted perfection," Emily replied, her words cutting like a blade. "And when you didn't get it, you burned everything down." "I didn't burn anything down," Tyler said as the courtroom doors closed between them. "I just stopped paying to rebuild things that other people kept tearing apart." 6 months after Emily's sentencing, Tyler received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph: Jason, sitting in what looked like a luxury resort, smiling and holding a drink with a small umbrella in it. On the back was written, "Some family reunions are more profitable than others. Thanks for teaching us the value of cutting dead weight. K." Tyler stared at the photograph for a long time, understanding finally that Jason hadn't been Kyle's sufferer or unwilling partner. He'd been Kyle's recruitment tool, his entry point into Tyler's family, his way of identifying and targeting a sufferer with significant assets and exploitable family dynamics. The crypto cafe had never been a real business. The debts had been manufactured. The crisis had been artificial. Everything, from his parents' emotional manipulation to Emily's affair to the warehouse confrontation, had been carefully orchestrated to pressure Tyler into financial surrender. Kyle had played a longer game than Tyler had imagined, and Jason, Emily, and his parents had all been willing participants. Tyler kept the photograph on his desk for exactly 1 week, then he shredded it and began making phone calls. "Janet," he said when his attorney answered, "I want to discuss asset recovery litigation." "Against whom?" "Everyone." The civil lawsuits began 2 months later. Tyler sued Kyle's organization under RICO statutes, his parents for conspiracy and fraud, and Jason for his role in the criminal enterprise. Most importantly, he sued Emily's estate for recovery of the financial intelligence and marital assets she'd transferred to Kyle's operation. "Mr. Brennan," Janet explained as they prepared the filings, "you understand that most of these defendants have no assets to recover? I understand that they need to face consequences for their choices," Tyler replied, his voice carrying the kind of finality that came from absolute moral certainty. "Emily chose Kyle over our marriage. My parents chose Jason over me. Jason chose crime over legitimate work. I'm just making sure they live with those choices." The lawsuits moved through the system with brutal efficiency. Tyler's parents, faced with legal fees they couldn't afford and evidence of their complicity in Kyle's scheme, declared bankruptcy and lost their house. Emily's conviction made the civil case against her estate a foregone conclusion. Jason remained missing, but Tyler's attorney filed seizure orders against any assets that might surface in the future. "You're destroying what's left of your family," Detective Martinez told Tyler when she called to update him on the federal investigation. "My family destroyed itself," Tyler replied without emotion. "I'm just documenting the damage." The investigation into Kyle's network continued for another year, ultimately uncovering a criminal enterprise that had stolen over $40 million from sufferers across 8 states. Tyler's case had been the thread that unraveled the entire operation, bringing down a network that had operated with impunity for years. But Kyle himself was never found. 2 years after Emily's sentencing, Tyler received a final communication from his former life. A letter from Carol, his mother, written from the assisted living facility where she and Frank had been forced to move after losing their house. "Tyler," the letter read in handwriting that seemed frailer than he remembered, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know you blame us for what happened with Jason and Emily. Maybe you're right to blame us. We made mistakes. We favored Jason because he seemed to need more help, and we thought you were strong enough to take care of yourself. We were wrong about a lot of things. But I want you to know that we never meant for any of this to happen. We never wanted to see you hurt. We never wanted to see your marriage destroyed. We thought we were trying to hold the family together, and instead we helped tear it apart. Frank's health isn't good. The doctors say he might not have much time left. He's too proud to write this letter himself. But he asked me to tell you that he's sorry. He's sorry for the things he said. He's sorry for choosing Jason over you. He's sorry for not understanding that you were trying to protect yourself from exactly what ended up happening. I don't expect you to forgive us. I don't expect you to want a relationship with us after everything we've done. But I wanted you to know that we understand now. We understand that you were right and we were wrong, and that our choices helped bad people hurt you. We love you, Tyler. We've always loved you, even when we made terrible decisions about how to show it. If you ever want to talk, we're at Sunset Manor on Oakwood Drive, but I understand if you don't. Love, Mom." Tyler read the letter 3 times, then filed it in a folder with all the other legal documents from his destroyed family relationships. He never replied. Frank died 4 months later. Tyler read about it in the obituary section of the local newspaper. The funeral was small, attended by a few elderly neighbors and Carol. Jason was listed as a surviving son, though he remained missing and wanted by federal authorities. Tyler wasn't mentioned in the obituary at all. He sent flowers to the funeral home with a card that read, "For the family that could have been." Carol called to thank him, but Tyler didn't answer the phone. 3 years after the warehouse confrontation that had ended his marriage and destroyed his family, Tyler received an unexpected visitor at his apartment. Detective Martinez, now retired from the police force, came by on a Saturday morning with news that would finally close the circle. "We found Kyle," she said simply. Tyler invited her in and made coffee while she explained. Kyle had been arrested in Costa Rica on unrelated fraud charges. During processing, his fingerprints had matched the federal warrants from Tyler's case. Extradition was already in progress. "What about Jason?" Tyler asked. "Also arrested. They were running a new operation targeting American retirees. Same basic structure as before. Manufactured family crises, emotional manipulation, financial coercion." Tyler felt a strange sense of completion, as if a chapter that had been left unfinished was finally reaching its end. The people who'd destroyed his life were finally facing consequences for their choices. "There's something else," Martinez said. "Kyle wants to talk to you." "About what?" He wouldn't say, but his attorney contacted federal prosecutors. "Apparently, he has information he thinks you'd want to hear." Tyler considered the request for exactly 30 seconds. "Tell him no. Tyler, he might have information about Emily's involvement, about whether she was really a willing participant or—" "It doesn't matter," Tyler interrupted, his voice carrying absolute finality. "Emily made her choice when she chose Kyle over our marriage. Whether she was manipulated or coerced or genuinely criminal doesn't change the fact that she chose to participate in trying to destroy me financially. The why doesn't matter anymore." Martinez studied Tyler's face with the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades reading people. "You've gotten hard." "I've gotten realistic," Tyler replied without apology. "I spent 8 years married to someone who was capable of betraying me completely. I spent 35 years trying to maintain relationships with family members who were willing to sacrifice me for convenience. Kyle didn't make those people into what they were. He just revealed what they'd always been. And you're okay with that level of isolation? Tyler looked out the window at the city skyline, then back at Martinez. I'm okay with knowing exactly where I stand with people. I'm okay with relationships based on genuine mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. I'm okay with building a life around people who choose to be in it rather than people who feel trapped or entitled to be in it. Martinez left without pressing the issue further. 2 weeks later, Kyle was extradited to face federal charges for his role in defrauding dozens of families. His trial would begin in 6 months. Tyler didn't plan to attend. 4 years after his divorce was finalized, Tyler met someone new. Jennifer was a financial analyst who'd survived her own family crisis, parents who'd tried to pressure her into funding her gambling-obsessed brother's debts. She understood Tyler's boundaries around family obligation and manipulation in ways that went beyond mere intellectual agreement. Their relationship developed slowly, built on honesty about past betrayals and clear communication about future expectations. When Tyler told her about Emily, Kyle, Jason, and his parents, Jennifer listened without judgment and asked only one question. "Are you still angry?" "No," Tyler realized as he answered, surprised by the truth of it. "I'm grateful." "Grateful?" "For learning the difference between people who love you and people who need you. For discovering that loyalty is earned, not inherited. For understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive choices." Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. "My therapist calls it differentiation. Learning to maintain your sense of self, even when people you care about are trying to manipulate you into becoming who they need you to be." Tyler had never heard the term before, but it perfectly described what he'd learned through the destruction of his marriage and family relationships. The ability to love people without losing yourself to their dysfunction. The capacity to maintain boundaries, even when maintaining those boundaries meant accepting loss. Kyle's trial lasted 2 months. Tyler read about it in the newspaper but didn't attend. Kyle was convicted on 43 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and organized criminal activity. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Emily was called as a witness for the prosecution, testifying via video link from the federal facility where she was serving her sentence. Tyler didn't watch her testimony, but Jennifer did and gave him a summary afterward. "She still maintains that she was manipulated," Jennifer reported with clinical detachment. Her testimony was all about how Kyle exploited her emotional vulnerabilities and convinced her that she was helping save her marriage by gathering information about your finances. What did the prosecutor say? That her version of events was contradicted by 3 years of electronic evidence showing willing participation in criminal conspiracy. Tyler felt nothing hearing this. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness. Emily had become a stranger to him years ago. Her continued refusal to accept responsibility for her choices was just confirmation that he'd been right to end their marriage. Jason was sentenced to 15 years. Tyler's parents both died while he was in prison. Carol from complications related to diabetes, Frank from heart failure. Neither had attempted to contact Tyler in their final years. Tyler read about their ends in the local newspaper and felt the same emptiness he'd felt reading about Frank's passing. Sadness for what might have been, but no regret about his decision to protect himself from their dysfunction. 5 years after the warehouse confrontation, Tyler and Jennifer married in a small ceremony attended by friends and chosen family, people who'd proven their loyalty through actions rather than genetic accident. Tyler's best man was Alex Chen, a colleague who'd supported him through the darkest period of his family crisis. Jennifer's maid of honor was Sarah Rodriguez, her business partner and closest friend. No blood relatives attended the wedding. Neither Tyler nor Jennifer missed them. On their honeymoon in Ireland, Tyler received an email from Emily. She was being released on parole after serving 6 years of her sentence. The email was brief. "Tyler, I want you to know that I understand now what Kyle was and what I became by working with him. I'm not asking for forgiveness, and I'm not trying to restart our relationship. I just wanted you to know that you were right about everything, and I was wrong about everything. And I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I hope you found happiness. You deserve it. Emily?" Tyler showed the email to Jennifer, who read it thoughtfully. "How do you feel about that?" "Glad that she finally understands what happened," Tyler said after considering the question. "But it doesn't change anything. Understanding your mistakes doesn't undo their consequences." Are you going to reply? Tyler considered the question, then deleted the email without responding. Some chapters of life needed to stay closed. 3 years later, Tyler received news that Jason had died in prison. A heart attack at 39, brought on by years of substance misuse and the stress of incarceration. Tyler felt a moment of genuine sadness, not for the man Jason had become, but for the little brother he'd once tried to protect. He attended Jason's funeral, where he saw Emily for the first time in 8 years. She looked older, harder, marked by prison and consequences. They nodded to each other across the graveyard but didn't speak. After the service, Tyler stood beside Jason's grave for a few minutes, remembering the child who'd looked up to him before growing into a man who'd tried to destroy him. "I'm sorry it ended this way," Tyler said quietly to the headstone. "But I'm not sorry I protected myself from what you chose to become." Emily approached as Tyler was leaving. She looked fragile, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who'd betrayed him for Kyle's criminal organization. Tyler," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." "He was my brother," Tyler replied simply. "I know you probably hate me." "I don't hate you, Emily. I don't feel anything about you anymore." "You're a stranger who used to be married to someone I used to be." Emily flinched as if she'd been slapped. "I deserve that. You deserve to build a life based on better choices than the ones that destroyed our marriage," Tyler said with quiet finality. "But that life doesn't include me." "I know, I wanted you to know that losing you was the worst consequence of everything I did. Worse than prison, worse than losing everything. I lost the best man I'd ever known because I was too stupid and selfish to recognize what I had." Tyler studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. He found only genuine regret and exhaustion. "Emily," he said finally, "I hope you find peace. But I found mine by accepting that some damage can't be repaired, only survived." They parted without saying goodbye. Tyler never saw Emily again. 10 years after the warehouse confrontation that had ended one life and begun another, Tyler stood in the backyard of the house he'd bought with Jennifer, watching their 5-year-old daughter play on the swing set he'd built from scratch. Jennifer was in the kitchen, preparing dinner and laughing at something on the phone with Sarah. Tyler's phone buzzed with a news alert. Federal prisoner Kyle Westman found dead in his cell under unexplained circumstances. Tyler read the brief article, then deleted the notification without sharing it with Jennifer. Some news from the past wasn't worth carrying into the present. The daughter who would never meet Tyler's original family ran toward him across the lawn, shouting about a butterfly she'd seen. Tyler caught her up in his arms and spun her around, listening to her laugh with pure joy. "Daddy," she said when he set her down, "tell me about when you were little." Tyler looked toward the house, where his wife was cooking dinner for the family they'd chosen to build together. "When I was little," he said, "I thought family was something you were born into. Now I know it's something you choose to create." "What's the difference?" Tyler picked up his daughter again, holding her close. "The difference is that chosen family stays because they want to, not because they have to." She considered this with the serious expression she got when trying to understand adult concepts. "And you chose us?" "Every day," Tyler said with absolute certainty. "Every single day." As the sun set over their chosen life, Tyler felt the peace that came from understanding the difference between loyalty and love, between obligation and choice, between the family you survive and the family you create. Kyle was dead. Emily was free but alone. Jason was gone. His parents were buried in graves he'd never visit. And Tyler had never been happier.